4 hours. That was how long Diana Bennett would have to wait before everything would change forever. The glass doors of Highland Crest Bank slid open silently, letting a cool, pleasant breeze drift out onto the sun-drenched sidewalk. A subtle blend of freshly brewed coffee and fine leather hung in the air, evoking an atmosphere of refined luxury. Diana stepped inside with calm composure, her confident gaze sweeping over the bank's elegant, opulent interior. In her early 50s, she still carried the lithe, alert bearing of a seasoned professional. She wore a perfectly tailored cream blazer over a sleek black dress paired with simple high heels. Each of her strides seemed to project an invisible authority, an internal strength born of overcoming countless challenges. She felt no trepidation as she entered. She had sat in the most powerful boardrooms, signed multi-million-dollar contracts, and built her own consulting firm from the ground up. She knew her worth and trusted that her professionalism would earn her respect. Her appointment was set for 10 a.m. with Linda Kramer, a senior manager at the bank. True to habit, Diana had arrived an hour early. She liked to observe and prepare thoroughly before any important meeting. The reception area stood just ahead. A young blonde woman, hair in a neat bun and wearing a gold nameplate that read Melissa Harper, sat behind a polished mahogany desk. Diana approached with a courteous smile. "Good morning," she said softly. Melissa looked up, her eyes flicking over Diana with barely concealed indifference. "Welcome to Highland Crest Bank," she replied in a flat, almost mechanical tone. "Do you have an appointment?" "My name is Diana Bennett." Diana placed her leather briefcase on the desk, her voice steady and clear. "I'm here to see Miss Kramer at 10 a.m. Melissa tapped at her keyboard for a few silent seconds, her expression remaining coolly detached. Finally, she nodded once. "Yes, you're on the list. Please take a seat in the waiting area over there. Miss Kramer will call you shortly," she said, clearly eager to end the exchange. Diana inclined her head and turned toward the seating area. She chose a chair by the window, where streams of morning light painted the polished marble floor with radiant patterns. Around her, impeccably dressed young professionals, men and women, stood in small clusters, animatedly discussing the stock market and investment opportunities, the sounds of money and power in motion. She checked her watch. It was only 9:15 a.m. Diana was in no rush. She gently opened her briefcase and reviewed her documents one last time before the meeting. Yet something about Melissa's strangely chilly demeanor left her with a vague sense of unease. She dismissed it quickly. She had encountered similar attitudes before, and always reminded herself that professionalism would see her through. Outside, the sky remained a brilliant blue, and such a beautiful day should have heralded a promising start. Leaning back in her chair, Diana watched as more clients flowed in, silently convinced that this waiting period was merely a prelude to a smooth meeting and swift resolution. She smiled to herself, fully unaware that she was on the brink of one of the greatest challenges of her life. These next 4 hours would change everything. Not just today's appointment, but her deepest beliefs about how people treat one another in a world still rife with hidden prejudices. The gentle chime of the clock echoed on the wall of Highland Crest Bank, striking exactly 10 a.m. That should have been the moment Diana Bennett was invited in to see Senior Manager Linda Kramer. Instead, all that greeted her was a cold, lingering silence in a space that seemed perfect down to the last detail. Diana cast another glance toward the reception desk, her eyes landing on Melissa Harper, the young woman still busy typing, her gaze occasionally drifting to the computer screen as if she'd entirely forgotten Diana was there. A vague discomfort began to creep into Diana's mind, but she resolved to remain patient. Perhaps Linda was tied up with another important client, she thought. After all, in finance, meetings sometimes ran long. It was perfectly normal. Then another client entered the bank, quickly catching Diana's attention. He was a young man, perhaps around 30, dressed in a sharp light gray suit, his face bright and confident. Diana watched as he approached the desk and casually exchanged a few words with Melissa. Suddenly, her demeanor changed completely. Melissa looked up and greeted him with a radiant smile she had never shown Diana. "Good morning, Mr. Lancaster," Melissa said sweetly, almost familiarly. "Morning, Melissa. How are you today?" the man replied warmly. "I'm great, thank you. Please go right on in. Miss Kramer is waiting for you," Melissa said, immediately standing to guide him through the frosted glass doors to the private area. Diana sat perfectly still, fighting to keep her surprise hidden. That brief exchange laid bare an uncomfortable truth. He was being served immediately, no wait at all, while she, who had a confirmed appointment, was left waiting. She glanced around the waiting room, hoping for a sympathetic glance from another client, but met only indifferent stares. A strange loneliness washed over her. Never before had Diana felt so small in such an elegant, grand setting as Highland Crest Bank. Time dragged on in an icy slowness. The minute hand on the clock continued its steady march. Before long, it chimed 10:30 a.m. Anxiety began to settle in. Though patient by nature, she knew that people in her industry rarely tolerated such unprofessionalism. Just then, the glass doors opened again. A middle-aged woman in a cream-colored coat, carrying a luxury handbag, strode in, chatting casually on her phone. Melissa sprang to her feet, her face lighting up as if greeting a long-lost friend. "Good morning, Mrs. Lancaster. So lovely to see you today. Please come right in. Miss Kramer and Mr. Lancaster went in just moments ago." "Thank you, Melissa. You're so thoughtful." The woman smiled as she passed, heading straight to the inner area. Diana's hand clenched into an unconscious fist. She realized she wasn't the only one noticing this odd favoritism, yet it was clear Melissa was purposefully ignoring her. By 11 a.m., after a full hour of waiting, Diana's composure finally cracked. Tension crept deep into her mind. She rose and approached the reception desk again, determined to remain as polite as possible. "Excuse me, Melissa," Diana began, keeping her voice calm. "Could you please check again? I've been waiting for an hour now. My appointment was at 10 a.m. with Miss Kramer." Melissa raised an eyebrow, as if surprised Diana spoke up again. She tapped a few keys, her attitude still icy. "I already informed her. She's still with a client. She'll call you when she's finished," Melissa replied coldly, offering no sympathy. "Are you sure she knows I've arrived and been waiting?" Diana pressed, fighting back her disappointment. "Of course," Melissa said curtly. "Please wait a bit longer and I'll notify her again." Diana nodded and returned to her seat, her heart heavy. In her long career, she'd faced many awkward situations, but never such blatant favoritism, especially not in a place as prestigious as Highland Crest Bank. Settling back into the familiar chair, Diana let out a soft sigh. The clock on the wall continued its relentless tick, reminding her that this meeting might not be as straightforward as she'd imagined, and that this could be just the beginning of a far greater challenge. As the clock hand inched toward 12, the midday sun grew fiercer, streaming through Highland Crest Bank's large windows and casting mottled ribbons of light across the gleaming marble floor. Diana sat silently in the chair where she had waited for 2 hours. Each passing minute felt longer than the last, and her patience began to waver under the invisible pressure of time. 2 hours of waiting. That was no longer an ordinary delay. With her seasoned business experience, Diana knew that no high-end bank would make a scheduled client wait this long unless something truly unusual was at play. Still, she mustered what calm she had left and decided to rise once more to clarify the situation with Melissa. Diana stood and walked slowly to the reception desk. Each step carried the weight of her disappointment and one last effort to remain courteous. Melissa sat in her usual spot, eyes fixed on her computer screen, pretending not to notice Diana approaching. "Excuse me, Melissa," Diana said softly but firmly, striving to catch the younger woman's attention. Melissa looked up with an expression of annoyance and disdain, as though Diana were interrupting her most critical task. "Yes, Miss Bennett." "I've been waiting for 2 hours," Diana stated clearly, her voice steady, despite the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "Could you please tell me how much longer Ms. Kramer will be occupied?" Melissa tapped her keyboard absent-mindedly, her gaze flickering back to the screen. Then she shrugged nonchalantly. "I've told you already. Ms. Kramer will call when she's done. I don't have any new information." "But I've waited far too long," Diana pressed on, her disappointment growing more audible. "Shouldn't my 10 a.m. appointment have been prioritized?" Melissa frowned, her impatience obvious. "Our bank strives to serve every client as attentively as possible. If Miss Kramer hasn't called you, it means she's genuinely busy." Diana drew a deep breath, forcing herself to remain composed in the face of such blatant indifference. She was about to respond when the glass doors opened and a confident, elegant young woman entered. Clad in a navy sheath dress that accentuated her flawless figure, her heels clicked gracefully across the polished floor. It was Emily Lancaster, another familiar face at Highland Crest. Melissa sprang up and greeted Emily with a radiant smile and enthusiastic welcome, an enthusiasm Diana had never experienced herself. "Good morning, Miss Lancaster. Wonderful to see you. You here to see Miss Kramer?" Melissa's voice was sugary sweet, a stark contrast to her earlier tone. "That's right, Melissa," Emily replied gently. "I have an urgent matter today, so I'm hoping Linda can see me right away." "Oh, of course," Melissa exclaimed, eager to escort her inside. "Miss Kramer is always ready to see you immediately." Diana watched in stunned silence as Emily was led past the waiting area she had occupied for 2 hours and into the private office beyond. She stood frozen, a bitter lump rising in her throat. This was no longer a mere oversight. It was clear discrimination, an unspoken declaration that her time and worth held no value here. Instinctively, Diana scanned the room for anyone else who might have noticed the injustice, but the other clients, dressed men and women, were engrossed in their phones and private conversations, utterly indifferent. Melissa returned to her desk, deliberately avoiding Diana's reproachful gaze, and resumed working as though nothing had happened. Diana quietly reclaimed her seat, her heart heavy with indignation. She had never imagined she would one day be the center of such blatant prejudice. The clock continued its cold, relentless ticking, a reminder that her ordeal was far from over, and that the worst might still lie ahead. Taking a deep breath, Diana steadied her swirling emotions. She knew she could not remain silent forever. Yet she also recognized that she needed to be sharper and more resolute than ever. In that moment, Diana understood that this appointment was no longer just a meeting. It was a silent battle for her dignity and her right to equal treatment. And she was ready to fight, armed with the strength and determination that had carried her through so many challenges before. 3 hours had passed since Diana Bennett first set foot in Highland Crest Bank. The afternoon sun streamed harshly through the expansive glass windows, making the interior feel stifling despite the air conditioning running at full blast. Diana sat in the soft leather chair but no longer felt any comfort. Each slow tick of the clock made her feel imprisoned in an invisible cell, where silence and indifference formed cold, unyielding bars. Her steady gaze fixed on the reception desk, where Melissa Harper continued to feign busyness with her computer screen. What hurt Diana the most was Melissa's deliberate aloofness. This young woman was clearly doing everything she could to avoid Diana's eyes, even though they were only a few steps apart. After 3 long, grueling hours, Diana's patience finally reached its limit. She realized this was no longer a simple delay or ordinary busy work. It was a subtle display of power, a cruelly artful tactic she'd seen before in her career, but never endured firsthand for so long. Taking a deep breath, Diana rose once more and walked deliberately to the reception desk. Her footsteps echoed sharply on the marble floor, but this time she paid no mind to the onlookers. Now, more than ever, she needed to reclaim her own dignity. "Melissa," Diana said clearly, her tone still polite but firmly resolute. "I've been waiting for 3 hours. I believe I deserve a proper explanation instead of sitting here in limbo." Melissa reluctantly looked up, her expression cool and edged with annoyance, as she confronted Diana directly. She sighed, as if Diana's very presence were an inconvenience. "Miss Bennet," Melissa replied in a flat, emotionless voice, "I've told you repeatedly. Miss Kramer is busy. When she's finished, I'll let you know." "But you've been saying that for 3 hours," Diana responded gently, holding on to her last reserves of patience. "Could you at least check again? I can't believe Miss Kramer is so busy she can't spare even a minute to see a client who's been waiting since this morning." Melissa was silent for a moment, her eyes glancing past Diana as though she were a bothersome pest. Finally, she offered a dismissive, irresponsible shrug. "She knows you're waiting. I'll notify her again. Please wait a little longer. It'll be quick." "It'll be quick." That cold, meaningless refrain had echoed in Diana's ear dozens of times since she'd arrived. She stood there as waves of fury and disappointment surged within her. She forced her voice to remain calm against the stark irresponsibility before her. "I do hope you actually do that," Diana said, looking Melissa straight in the eye with unwavering determination. "Because I don't believe Highland Crest Bank wants its clients leaving with such a poor impression." Melissa didn't answer, merely giving a perfunctory nod before returning her gaze to the computer screen as if their exchange had never happened. Diana stood for a few more seconds, hoping Melissa would finally grasp the gravity of the situation, but the young receptionist remained oblivious, absorbed in her meaningless tasks. Quietly, Diana walked back to her seat, her disappointment and powerlessness deepening. She had always believed that her status and achievements would shield her from moments like this. Now she realized in bitter clarity that invisible prejudices persist, waiting for any opportunity to reveal themselves. Sitting down, Diana steadied her breathing, clinging to the fragile calm that remained. But at that moment, another scene unfolded that once again constricted her heart with blatant injustice and discrimination. Melissa rose again, this time with an even brighter smile, to welcome another arriving customer. An older white man in a pale blue golf shirt, moving with casual confidence. Without hesitation, she escorted him inside, as though Diana, who had waited 3 long hours mere feet away, did not exist. Diana closed her eyes for a moment, fighting back the choking wave of indignation. She knew then that silence and patience would no longer suffice. She needed to be stronger and more assertive, because this wasn't just a personal slight. It was a stark reminder of the injustices still rife in society. The clock continued its relentless chime, a cold reminder that time waits for no one, and that Diana could not keep waiting in silence any longer. The clock at Highland Crest Bank had just struck 2 p.m., its chime ringing sharply through the stifling silence. Diana Bennett sat upright, her gaze steely yet exhausted, after enduring 4 hours of cold, unreasonable dismissal from the staff. In that moment, she knew her patience had finally been shattered. The smoldering indignation inside her flared into a roaring blaze, burning away every ounce of restraint and courtesy she'd maintained since morning. Her heart pounded with each tick of the clock, urging her to act. Slowly, she rose from her chair and snapped her blazer into place, her determined eyes fixed on the frosted glass door where Linda Kramer sat. Calm, indifferent to Diana's silent presence. At the reception desk, Melissa Harper noticed Diana standing for the first time. The young woman's perpetually aloof expression flickered with genuine alarm and worry. She hurried from her station to block Diana's path, forcing a veneer of composure over her concern. "Miss Bennett, you can't go in there right now, I've told you. Miss Kramer still can't see you." "Melissa," Diana met her gaze with an authority she'd never shown before. "I've waited 4 hours. 4 hours. Do you even understand what that means? I will not wait another minute." "But," Melissa began, only to have Diana cut her off sharply. "There are no more buts. I have a confirmed appointment, and I intend to ask Linda Kramer in person why I've been treated this way." With resolute steps, Diana passed Melissa, who stood frozen, powerless to stop her. Panic and helplessness danced in Melissa's wide eyes as Diana strode on. Reaching the frosted door, Diana's hand closed firmly around the icy metal handle. Without hesitation, she flung it open. The door swung wide onto a long corridor lined with private offices. Her footsteps rang out confidently on the polished marble floor, as if she were charging directly into the heart of a battle she refused to lose. At the far end, through an open office door, Diana saw Linda Kramer reclining behind her desk. Linda's gold-rimmed glasses rested on the bridge of her nose as she stared at her computer screen. No sign of the busy client Melissa had claimed she was with. The office's serene calm struck Diana as wildly incongruous with the fury surging through her. Startled, Linda looked up at Diana's sudden entrance. Confusion crossed her face for a brief instant, then hardened into obvious irritation. "Miss Bennett," she said, struggling to stay composed. "You weren't called in. You should have waited outside." Diana stepped fully into the room, standing toe-to-toe with her. Her unwavering gaze forced Linda to take an involuntary step back. "I've waited 4 hours, Miss Kramer," Diana said, enunciating each word. Her controlled anger filled the room with tension. 4 hours, with no reasonable explanation, no basic courtesy from your bank. I need you to tell me exactly why I've been subjected to this unprofessional and unfair treatment." Linda's brow furrowed. She set her glasses on the desk, and her hands trembled slightly, rare signs of vulnerability in a client. "Miss Bennett, I'm truly sorry you're unhappy, but our bank has been extremely busy today." "Extremely busy," Diana interrupted, her voice icy. "I've sat out there for 4 hours, watching one client after another breeze right in to see you. Is that the busy you're talking about?" Linda fell silent, unable to meet Diana's piercing stare. Her face registered growing discomfort, and the clumsy justification she'd prepared died on her lips. Diana inhaled deeply, regaining her calm but lacing her words with precision. "I came here because I believed in Highland Crest Bank's professionalism and fairness. But today, I'm deeply disappointed. If this is your standard of service, then know this: I will never silently endure it again." A heavy hush fell over the office after Diana's powerful declaration. Linda lowered her head entirely subdued by the controlled yet fierce authority before her. In that moment, Diana recognized she had conquered her own fear and anger, standing tall against a painful but necessary truth. She had proclaimed to everyone at Highland Crest Bank that she would never allow injustice and disrespect to go unchallenged. And no matter what happened next, Diana knew she had passed the final test of her endurance, rising up to claim her right to be treated with fairness and respect. The air in the room grew especially tense after Diana's firm declaration. She still stood there, her sharp gaze fixed on Linda Kramer, who was clearly stunned that Diana had walked in without waiting to be summoned. Linda quickly composed herself, her expression shifting to one of stern displeasure. She straightened in her seat, trying to appear calm, but the confusion was already etched on her face. "Miss Bennet," Linda said, her voice colder than ever, "I don't recall calling you in here. I thought Melissa made it clear that I was busy. You'll need to wait a little longer." Diana took another step forward, closing the distance between them. Her tone was calm but unwavering. "Busy? I've been waiting for exactly 4 hours, Linda. Tell me, how can you be so busy when I haven't seen a single client in this office with you all that time?" Linda blinked, momentarily surprised by the directness of Diana's challenge. But she quickly regained her composure, her gaze turning icy. "Miss Bennet, my work goes far beyond face-to-face meetings. I've been handling numerous files and internal matters. I believe Melissa explained that to you." Diana shook her head slightly, a bitter smile touching her lips. "Melissa? For 4 hours she offered nothing but empty promises of just a moment. Yet it seems your bank has a different standard when serving white clients." Linda's brow furrowed, her voice now sharp and defiant. "Are you implying something?" "Highland Crest Bank treats all clients equally. There is no discrimination here. You must be misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Diana echoed sarcastically. "If this were a misunderstanding, can you explain why white clients who arrived after me were served immediately, while I, who had a confirmed appointment, was left waiting for 4 hours with no satisfactory explanation?" Linda looked flustered for the first time, her hands clenching the edge of her desk. Her eyes betrayed genuine unease, though she fought to maintain her stern posture. "As I said, it was a scheduling mix-up and a few last-minute priority clients. I'm sorry you feel mistreated, but it wasn't intentional." "Unintentional?" Diana repeated, her voice rising with anger, making the room feel even colder. "Miss Kramer, I sat out there long enough to witness how Melissa and your bank welcomed other clients. I'm not a child to be fooled by meaningless words. This is blatant discrimination, and you know it." Linda leaned forward, her own anger finally surfacing. "Miss Bennet, be careful with such accusations. Highland Crest is one of the city's most reputable banks, and we will not tolerate baseless claims." Diana stepped even closer, her resolve stronger than ever, forcing Linda to inch back in her chair. "Linda, you know my claims are justified. If you doubt me, I'm prepared to produce clear evidence of how I was treated these past 4 hours, and I'm certain I'm not the only one who's experienced this here." Tension crackled between them, as if any word or look might spark a full-blown confrontation. Linda fell silent for several seconds, her eyes darting around the office as though seeking an escape route. Finally, she spoke, her tone softened but still cold. "Miss Bennet, I truly apologize if you feel that way. I will review what happened and ensure this doesn't happen again. But now, could you please leave my office and return to the waiting area? I will call you as soon as I've rescheduled." Diana fixed Linda with a steady stare, her disappointment and outrage plain on her face. She had hoped for at least an honest apology, something genuine, but all she received were empty reassurances. "No, Linda," Diana said quietly, but with authority. "I will not leave until you give me a truthful explanation worthy of the 4 hours you've taken from me today. I'm not someone you can just brush off or treat like a second-class client. Understand that your actions will have far graver consequences than you imagine." In that moment, Diana saw genuine shock and dismay flicker across Linda's features. She had struck a nerve, and Diana was determined to fight for the respect she, and many others, rightfully deserved. The tension in Linda Kramer's office froze solid in the wake of Diana Bennett's powerful declaration. Linda was about to snap back, her eyes flashing with anger and embarrassment, when the office door suddenly swung open, shattering the oppressive atmosphere. Richard Langford, the formidable CEO of Highland Crest Bank, strode in with his usual confident, welcoming air. Behind him followed 2 other senior executives, impeccably dressed in tailored suits, their expressions serious but composed. The moment Richard spotted Diana standing there, his face lit up with genuine surprise and delight. He broke into a broad smile and hurried forward with arms outstretched, like welcoming an old friend home. "Diana, what a surprise to see you here," he exclaimed warmly. "It's been too long. How have you been?" Caught off guard, Diana nonetheless returned his smile and took his hand in a brief, affectionate shake, though the last remnants of her earlier tension still shadowed her expression. "Richard, it's wonderful to see you again." "I've been well, thank you. But today I've run into a situation I'd like your help with," Diana replied calmly but firmly, casting a quick, pointed glance at Linda, whose face had gone pale with embarrassment. Richard's smile faltered as he immediately sensed the seriousness in Diana's tone. He turned to Linda, his eyes shifting from friendly warmth to a sharp, scrutinizing glare. "What's going on, Linda? Miss Bennett is one of our most valued clients. I hope she hasn't been made uncomfortable," Richard said, his voice still measured but carrying unmistakable authority. Linda visibly stiffened under the weight of his scrutiny. Now, completely rattled, Linda cleared her throat several times, scrambling for a coherent explanation. Yet every word she fumbled sounded hollow and inadequate in the CEO's commanding presence. "Mr. Langford, well, today's schedule was overbooked, and I tried my best to accommodate Miss Bennett, but unfortunately," Linda stammered, each awkward hesitation betraying her fear. Richard's brow furrowed, his gaze even colder as he cut her off. "Overbooked? How long has Miss Bennett been waiting?" Diana spoke up, her voice calm yet unwavering. 4 hours, Richard. I arrived promptly at 10 a.m. and was left waiting indefinitely, while clients who came after me were seen immediately. I'm sure you understand what that implies." The room seemed to freeze at Diana's words. Richard pivoted fully toward Linda, his expression now void of any friendliness, replaced by clear disappointment and severity. "Linda, I expect a clear explanation. Miss Bennett waited 4 hours with no proper assistance or apology. That is not how Highland Crest Bank serves or respects its clients," Richard stated, each syllable a precise rebuke that drove home Linda's failure. Linda lowered her head, her hands clenching at her sides. She knew the gravity of the situation, especially in the presence of the CEO and 2 other senior leaders. "Mr. Langford, I sincerely apologize for today's incident. I made an error in scheduling. It was never my intention to keep Miss Bennett waiting so long. I will correct this immediately and ensure it never happens again," Linda managed, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain composed. Richard inhaled deeply, then turned back to Diana with genuine concern. "Diana, I am deeply sorry you experienced this unacceptable treatment. This should never have occurred at our bank. I promise to address this matter with the utmost seriousness." Diana nodded, a small measure of relief softening her features as she received the earnest respect and empathy she deserved from Richard Langford, someone she knew always placed fairness and integrity above all. "Thank you, Richard. I trust you'll take whatever steps are necessary to rectify the situation," she replied evenly, her tone still strong and resolute. In that moment, Linda realized the tables had turned completely. What she had believed could be brushed aside had become a major issue being handled personally by the CEO. Standing there, Linda felt her career and reputation at Highland Crest Bank teeter on the brink. She looked from Diana to Richard, a profound helplessness washing over her. Deep inside, Linda Kramer finally grasped that the disregard and bias she had shown, whether through oversight or intent, had come back to exact the harshest possible penalty. The small conference room fell into a suffocating silence after Diana's final words. Richard Langford remained rooted to the spot, his face etched with both astonishment and profound disappointment. The moment he realized that Diana Bennett, a woman of sterling reputation in the business community, whom he personally held in the highest regard, had been left waiting 4 hours without so much as a courtesy from his own staff, his anger flared visibly across his features. He whipped his gaze toward Linda Kramer, his eyes colder than ever, as if struggling to rein in a rising fury before speaking. The CEO's authority and severity radiated outward, causing Linda to shrink back, unable to meet his steely stare. "Linda," Richard began in a slow, commanding tone, each word landing like the gavel of a stern judgment, "explain to me exactly why a prestigious, important client like Miss Bennett was left waiting 4 hours without any concern or clear explanation from you or your team." Linda swallowed hard, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the edge of the desk for what little composure she had left. She averted her eyes from Richard's intense gaze, her voice trembling with insecurity. "Mr. Langford, I already explained. It was just a misunderstanding. I never intended to keep Miss Bennett waiting so long." "A misunderstanding?" Richard cut in, his tone sharpening further. "Linda, 4 hours of waiting with no reasonable explanation is not a misunderstanding. It's unacceptable disrespect and unprofessionalism. I can't believe our bank let something this serious happen to a client, especially someone like Miss Bennett." Linda bowed her head even lower, her face pale with fear and mortification. She knew her feeble excuse had no hope of satisfying Richard, an executive renowned for exacting standards. Richard turned back to Diana, his expression softening into genuine regret and empathy. "Diana, I am truly sorry for what you've endured today. This is a serious lapse, and I promise you I will address it personally and immediately." "I know you value fairness and professionalism, Richard," Diana replied calmly but resolutely, her tone still respectful. "But I can't help saying that what I experienced today has profoundly shaken my confidence in how your bank operates and treats its clients." Richard nodded solemnly, his face conveying full awareness of the situation's gravity. He shifted his uncompromising gaze back to Linda, his next words ringing out clear and irrevocable. "Linda, you must understand that your actions today not only harmed Miss Bennett, but also severely damaged Highland Crest Bank's reputation, one we've worked so hard to build. I am deeply disappointed in your conduct and that of the reception team. This is not the standard I will accept here." Linda stood motionless, a cold dread creeping down her spine. For the first time in her career, she felt her authority, and her very sense of security at the bank, shatter before her eyes, and it terrified her. Richard inhaled deeply, his voice unwavering as he concluded, "Immediately after this meeting, I will convene an emergency session with our entire reception staff and senior management to review today's events. I will not allow anyone at Highland Crest Bank to think that discrimination or disrespect toward our clients is ever permissible." Diana felt a wave of relief wash over her at Richard's decisive vow. She recognized his genuine concern and knew he would take concrete steps to remedy the situation, and that restored some of her faith in the bank. Turning back to Diana, Richard's eyes held sincere resolve. "Diana, what happened today is unacceptable, and I ask your permission to correct these failures in the most transparent and thorough way possible. I promise you, no Highland Crest client will ever endure such treatment again." Diana offered a small, appreciative nod. Her anger and disappointment had eased, replaced by cautious optimism that real, positive change would follow. Meanwhile, Linda Kramer stood frozen like a statue, unable to speak. She understood fully that her career and credibility at Highland Crest Bank had suffered a grievous blow, and that the fallout from her negligence today would not be easily erased. The small meeting room held its breath in heavy silence, broken only by the steady breathing of those present, each struggling to regain composure. Richard Langford knew this was the pivotal moment. The moment to prove to Diana and every other client that Highland Crest Bank would never compromise on respect or justice. The atmosphere in the meeting room was as heavy as lead. Richard Langford, his face cold and resolute, did not take his eyes off Linda Kramer, who stood before him in a daze, terrified. Diana Bennett stood quietly at his side, fully aware that this was a decisive moment, not just for her personally, but for Highland Crest Bank as a whole. Richard drew a slow, steady breath, his gaze still icy and stern as he focused on Linda. His voice rang out with authority, making the very walls seem to tremble under the weight of his words. "Linda, I've heard enough of your unconvincing excuses. I cannot accept that a valued customer like Miss Bennett was treated with such disrespect and injustice. Your actions have not only caused her personal harm, but have also seriously damaged the reputation I've worked so hard to build for this bank." Linda began to speak, but Richard raised a hand to cut her off, giving her no chance to continue her defense. His eyes grew even colder as he declared, "Effective immediately, you are suspended pending a full investigation. I want you out of this room and off the bank's premises until I reach a final decision." His words crashed like thunder, and Linda went pale with shock and fear. She stood frozen, her eyes wide in a panic, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table for support. "But, Mr. Langford, she stammered, voice shaking. "I said, leave," Richard interrupted sharply, his gaze sharper than ever. "This is not a request, it is an order. You will obey it at once." With her head bowed, Linda dared not argue further. She turned and walked out, each step heavy, as though gravity itself were holding her down. When the door clicked shut behind her, an absolute stillness fell over the room, as if no one could believe what had just happened. Outside, Melissa Harper, the receptionist who had been straining to listen through the glass door, stood frozen as she watched Linda emerge, her face drained of color, as if struck by a verdict. In that moment, Melissa realized that today's indifference and disdain toward customers would no longer be tolerated or swept under the rug. Richard turned back to Diana, his expression softening into one of genuine respect and remorse. "Diana, I want to apologize again for what you endured today. I promise you, no customer of Highland Crest Bank will ever suffer such treatment again." Diana inclined her head, gratitude and resolve shining in her eyes. "I believe you, Richard, but removing Linda alone won't solve the underlying issues." Richard nodded in full agreement, understanding the truth of her words. He stepped briskly out of the room and headed for the reception desk, where Melissa stood trembling, her face deathly pale at his approach. "Melissa," he said clearly, his tone calm but unmistakably powerful, "I want you to understand one thing. Your attitude toward Miss Bennet and toward any customer today was completely unacceptable. This is not a corner store. This is Highland Crest Bank, where respect and professionalism are absolute requirements." Melissa tried to speak, but found no words as his steely gaze held her in place. "Starting today, I am calling a mandatory meeting for all reception and management staff to retrain on customer service standards at this bank. As for you, Melissa, you will receive a formal disciplinary notice and be placed under strict supervision. If I receive any similar complaints in the future, you know the consequences." Tears welled in Melissa's eyes as she nodded repeatedly, fully grasping the seriousness of her misconduct and the difficult days that lay ahead. Richard then turned back to Diana, sincerity in his eyes. "I hope you will accept my deepest apologies, both from me personally and from the bank. We will not let this happen again." Diana met his gaze with firm confidence. "I trust in your commitment, Richard, and I truly hope this marks the first step toward meaningful change." In that moment, everyone in the room understood that what had just transpired was more than a warning to Linda and Melissa. It was a powerful, unequivocal message of accountability and transformation, a pledge that Highland Crest Bank would never again tolerate discrimination or disrespect toward any customer. The conference room felt heavy as lead after Diana's last words. Richard Langford paused, his face a mask of cold resolve, as he locked eyes with Linda Kramer, who stood across from him, stunned and terrified. Diana Bennet waited quietly at his side, fully aware that this was a defining moment, not just for her, but for the future of Highland Crest Bank. Richard drew in a steadying breath, his gaze still icy and authoritative as he addressed Linda. His voice cut through the silence, every word resonant with command. "Linda, I've heard enough of your unconvincing explanations. I will not tolerate a valued client like Miss Bennet being treated with such disrespect and injustice. Your actions today have not only harmed her personally, but have dealt a serious blow to the reputation and integrity I've worked so hard to build for this bank." Linda opened her mouth to speak, but Richard raised a hand to interrupt, giving her no chance to further excuse herself. His eyes blazed with finality as he declared, "Effective immediately, you are suspended pending a full investigation. You will leave this room now and refrain from any duties at this bank until I reach a definitive decision." His words thundered through the room like lightning, and Linda's face drained of color. She stood paralyzed, eyes wide with panic, her hands trembling on the desk as if seeking some last shred of dignity. "But, Mr. Langford, she stammered, voice quivering. "I said, leave the room, Linda." Richard cut in sharply, his tone unyielding. "This is not a request, it is an order." Head bowed, Linda fled the room on unsteady legs, as if fighting the very air around her. As the door closed behind her, an almost palpable silence settled over those remaining, as if none could believe what had just transpired. Outside, at the reception desk, Melissa Harper had been straining to listen through the glass. She froze when she saw Linda emerge, pale and shaken as though she'd been judged by a higher power. Melissa's own confidence vanished in an instant. In that moment, she realized the indifference and disdain she'd shown today could no longer be swept under the rug. Richard turned back to Diana, his expression softening with genuine remorse and respect. "Diana, I want to apologize again for what you endured today. I promise no Highland Crest client will ever suffer like this again." Diana nodded, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and firmness. "Thank you, Richard. I trust you. But I also hope you understand that removing Linda alone won't solve the deeper issues here." Richard met her gaze with unwavering sincerity. Then he strode from the room toward the reception area, where Melissa still stood trembling, her face drained of color at the sight of him approaching. "Melissa." Richard's voice was calm, yet carried absolute authority. "Let me be clear. Your behavior toward Miss Bennett, and toward any client, was completely unacceptable. This isn't a small corner store. This is Highland Crest Bank, and every customer must always be treated with the highest respect and professionalism." Melissa tried to form a response but found her words abandoned before they could leave her lips as Richard's gaze bore into her. "Starting today, I'm convening a mandatory meeting for all reception and management staff to retrain on our customer service and conduct standards. And you, Melissa, will receive a formal disciplinary notice and will be closely monitored going forward. If I hear of any similar complaints, you know the consequences." Melissa nodded desperately, tears welling in her eyes. She understood the gravity of her actions and knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. Richard then returned to Diana, his eyes reflecting deep sincerity. "I hope you'll accept my profound apology, both from me personally and from the bank. We will ensure this never happens again." Diana met his gaze with warmth and resolve. "I believe in your commitment, Richard, and I truly hope this is just the first step toward addressing the issues I witnessed today." In that moment, everyone in the room recognized that what had occurred was more than just a rebuke of Linda and Melissa's conduct. It was a powerful declaration that Highland Crest Bank would no longer tolerate discrimination or disrespect of any kind, and a promise of meaningful change to come. After Diana finished sharing her story, the room fell into a brief, heavy silence. Richard Langford drew in a deep breath, as though gathering all his resolve and strength to make some very important decisions. His expression shifted from thoughtful to one of unmistakable determination. He was clearly ready to act at once. "Diana," he said, his voice serious but sincere and resolute, "I can't undo what happened to you today, but I can, and I will, do everything in my power to correct this mistake immediately." He stood and walked straight to the small desk in the conference room, opened a drawer, and pulled out the loan file that Linda Kramer had carelessly left there. Richard flipped through it quickly, his eyes pausing attentively on each figure and line. After a few moments of consideration, he looked up, met Diana's gaze, and spoke with conviction. "Your loan, Diana, should have been approved the moment you walked in this morning. I can't fathom why Linda delayed it so unreasonably. Right now, I'm going to authorize it myself and instruct the loan department to process everything today." He withdrew a fountain pen from his jacket pocket and signed the file decisively, the pen's scratch on paper echoing his determination. Then he handed the file to Diana with respectful seriousness. "I sincerely apologize that you did not receive the respect and service you deserved from the moment you arrived. As CEO, I not only feel responsible for resolving your personal situation, but also for ensuring that from now on, no other client endures anything like this." Diana accepted the file, feeling a measure of relief, but still holding on to the hope that today's events would amount to more than just words. She looked Richard in the eye and spoke softly, but with strength. "I appreciate your decisive action, Richard. But the most important thing, for me, and, I believe, for all your clients, is that you and your team truly change from within, to guarantee that discrimination and disrespect are never tolerated." Richard nodded, his resolve and sincerity clear. He turned to the two senior executives seated nearby, his eyes bright with a newfound determination. "I fully agree, Diana. To demonstrate this commitment, I am launching a comprehensive overhaul of the entire bank. We will revamp every training program on conduct and customer service for senior management, receptionists, security staff, everyone." The two executives nodded emphatically in support. Richard continued, his tone even more emphatic. "We must make it crystal clear to all employees that no one is ever permitted to treat our clients with discrimination or disrespect. Any act, however minor, whether based on race, gender, age, or anything similar, will be dealt with swiftly and severely." Turning once more to Diana, his expression softened with genuine respect. "I know my words can't instantly heal the hurt you've experienced, Diana. But I ask you to believe that, starting today, Highland Crest Bank is opening a new chapter, one where fairness and respect for our clients are the top priority in every decision and action." Diana nodded, reassured by the depth of his commitment and the clarity of his plan. She understood this was not empty rhetoric but a concrete course of action. Richard then addressed the senior executives again with a final directive. "Immediately after this meeting, convene an all-staff emergency session to lay out today's events and the new measures we'll implement. I want every employee to understand that treating clients professionally, fairly, and respectfully is non-negotiable here." The two executives rose and departed promptly to organize the meeting. Richard looked back at Diana, his voice quiet but heartfelt. "Thank you, Diana, for your patience and for sharing these invaluable insights. Because of you, I see now the serious gaps in our employee management and training. I promise you, positive change starts right now." Diana offered a gentle smile, her eyes reflecting the trust she placed in him. "Richard, I believe you will follow through. I hope that today's painful episode will become the real opportunity for Highland Crest Bank to grow stronger and more reliable in the eyes of its clients." Richard nodded firmly, his vow clear and unwavering. "That is exactly what I will do, Diana. I promise you, Highland Crest Bank will never again allow an incident like this to occur." The conversation between Diana and Richard ended with heartfelt commitments. Yet Diana knew a deeper issue remained, one that couldn't be resolved by a loan approval or a few apologies alone. Before leaving, she stood up and carefully picked up the loan file Richard had just signed, her gaze calm but resolute as she faced the CEO. "Richard," she began softly, her voice rich with experience and insight, "I'm grateful that you moved swiftly to resolve my personal issue today, but I hope you understand that what truly concerns me goes far beyond securing this loan, however important it may be." Richard listened intently, his eyes reflecting respect and seriousness. He nodded, inviting her to continue. "What matters most," Diana said deliberately, "is the attitude of bias and favoritism that still lingers within your organization. What I experienced today isn't merely an isolated mishap. It starkly reveals a deeper problem, a corporate culture that allows some employees to believe they have the right to treat certain clients with indifference or outright disrespect." Richard's brow furrowed in thought, recognizing that Diana was pointing to a far greater challenge than simply disciplining a few individuals. Diana pressed on, her tone both earnest and compassionate. "Richard, I've learned that real change must begin with a deep shift in mindset among leadership. Superficial measures, like punishing a few staff members or holding short training sessions, will never be enough unless you and your senior team are truly committed to tackling the root causes." Richard remained silent for a moment, his eyes clouded with both regret and determination. When he spoke, his conviction was unmistakable. Diana, you're absolutely right. Today's events are not just minor errors. They are a wake. Up call for me and everyone on the leadership team at Highland Crest Bank. I understand that transforming a long-standing culture requires bold, consistent action. Diana offered a small, encouraging smile, trusting in the sincerity behind his words, but she emphasized one last point. I'm glad you see that, Richard. Please remember that building a culture of respect and equality isn't just about policies. It must be reflected in every small action each day, in the way every single employee welcomes and serves every client who walks through your doors, regardless of who they are. Richard nodded firmly, signaling that he had not only heard her, but absorbed her message deeply. You're absolutely right, Diana. I promise you I won't stop at issuing new rules. I will work with the entire leadership team to foster a new culture, one where respect and equality are core values in every branch, from the executive suite to the front desk. Diana nodded, feeling a renewed sense of hope. She knew Richard was a leader who genuinely cared and was ready to act on his promises. Richard looked at her with deep gratitude. Diana, I truly appreciate your candor and sincerity today. You've helped me see the profound issues Highland Crest Bank must address. I guarantee that from this moment forward, no one at our bank will ever endure what you experienced. Richard, Diana replied with genuine warmth, I believe you will live up to that promise. But please remember that real change takes time and perseverance. I hope you will hold fast to your resolve and ensure today's commitments don't become empty words. Richard returned her smile, his eyes steadier and more determined than ever. You have my word, Diana. I will never let that happen. The changes we've discussed today will be my top priority from now on. Diana gave a final nod, clutching her loan file. She understood that the true responsibility now rested with Richard and the Highland Crest leadership. As she walked out of the meeting room, she felt confident that she had played a part in sparking a crucial transformation, one that might take time, but would surely lead to a stronger, more trustworthy bank. As Diana stepped out of a Highland Crest Bank, she felt as though a tremendous weight had lifted from her shoulders. Late, afternoon rays angled through the skyscrapers, casting long shadows across the bustling street. She paused, inhaled the fresh air, and truly sensed that today she had done what was right, not only for herself, but for everyone who's ever faced similar injustice. Her pocket phone buzzed. She pulled it out and saw the official email from Highland Crest. Your loan has been approved and is being processed immediately. A gentle smile touched her lips, but Diana knew the real victory of the day wasn't the loan itself. It was that she had stood up and demanded the respect she deserved. On her way home, Diana reflected on everything that had happened. She remembered Linda Kramer's terrified confusion, Melissa Harper's initial coldness and final trembling. Above all, she recalled Richard Langford's leadership, someone who listened and acted, pledged to reshape the bank's culture so discrimination could no longer take root. Though her own story might seem small in a vast, complex society, Diana understood its ripple effect would be anything but. Just days later, word spread, first among acquaintances, then across social media and mainstream outlets, about the elder woman who dared to claim her respect at a prestigious bank. Articles, commentaries, and personal testimonials appeared everywhere. People who'd endured discrimination began to speak up, sharing their experiences and rallying behind the cause of equality and dignity. Diana became a symbol, not just of strength and determination, but of the power of speaking out. The most moving moment came when strangers sent her letters and messages, saying her story inspired them to defend their own rights. A young woman wrote, I used to think staying silent made life easier, But your story taught me that silence can mean complicity." An older man added, "I never thought I could stand up for myself until I saw what you did. Now I know I deserve respect too, no matter who I am or where I come from." One bright morning, Richard Langford contacted Diana to share that real changes were underway at Highland Crest Bank. Ongoing training on equality, respect, and anti-discrimination, tangible measures, not empty promises. Diana realized then that this was her greatest victory. Standing before a crowd of hundreds at a community event promoting social equality, Diana spoke with conviction and warmth. "I never imagined I'd be at the center of a fight against discrimination. But life sometimes puts us in difficult situations, not for us to suffer, but to rise up and change them. Respect isn't something people give you. It's something you must demand and claim with resolve. Never be afraid to stand up and say, 'I deserve respect, I deserve fair treatment.' Because when you do, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're opening a door to a fairer world for all of us." Applause thundered through the hall. Faces glowed with admiration and hope. Diana knew then that her story would live on, not just as her own triumph, but as a torchlighting inspiration for anyone fighting injustice and demanding respect. As she stepped down from the podium, she felt a wondrous strength deep in her heart, power born of daring to do what's right. In that moment, Diana Bennett knew she had achieved far more than any personal success. She had inspired a new generation to value respect, courage, and social justice. Have you ever faced or witnessed a similar situation? Share your story in the comments below so together we can spread these vital values. Like, share, and if this is your first time here, hit subscribe now to join a community that stands up for justice and equality. Thank you, and see you in the next inspiring story.